podcast on LinkedIn Live. I'm Liz Hyman, and I am here with your Sales SOS podcast crew, Bryn Tillman, Mike Simmons, Daryl Prowl, and Renee Bigelow. And today we're talking about process because it's my favorite topic. But one of the things I hear a lot is, hey, our sales process doesn't work. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're on live. We're going to divide this up into 4 different topics. So bear with us as we change from episode to episode. But we're going to start in on the first episode. But again, remember, what we're talking about right now is what I hear all the time is, my sales process does not work. What do I do? All right. Hello, and welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. I'm Liz Hyman, your host, and I am here with your Sales SOS podcast crew, Bryn Tillman, Mike Simmons, Daryl Prowl, and Renee Bigelow. And today we're talking about what I hear all the time is my sales process doesn't work. It's not working. Something's wrong. What do we do? And that's what we're going to talk about. In this first episode, we're going to be talking about what is a repeatable business-to-business sales process? Like, what does that even mean? And how do you make one work? What's working and what's not working? So that's what we're going to start with. And I'm going to let whoever wants to start take it away. It might be Mike, because Mike and I share like this extreme passion for this topic. What's a sales process, Mike? And how do you know if it's working or not working?
Probably better for me to wait until everybody else goes, but just from a definition standpoint, I'll lay this out as a process. Like, what is sales? Sales, for me, is connecting the dots between problems that are either known or unknown and solutions that are either known or unknown. And once you connect those together, ultimately, you're able to help somebody on the other end solve the problem that they've got. So that's sales. The process is a series of events, when done in a specific order, yield the same result, or yields a desired result. So a process in the context of cooking or baking could be, you have a recipe and then you have a set of instructions that you have to go through in order to get to the end. And if you follow the recipe, all the right ingredients, done in the right steps, there's a high likelihood that at the end, you're going to have either a cake or lasagna or whatever the thing is that you're making. So that's how. So when you combine both of those together, you have the ability to take a problem, understand a problem, solve a problem with a solution. You go through steps, make it through each of those steps. At the end, you hit the ideal, or at some point you go closed one, then you implement, and then there should be some success on the other end.
So I want to jump in for a second on this idea of a recipe. And I forgot we were going to try and do this. I want to jump in on this idea of a recipe, right? So if you're baking, there are things that you can change. Like, I can add chocolate instead of cinnamon, or I can add a little coffee flavor if I want. But you can't do when you're baking is go, I don't think I'm going to add the baking powder. Because for anybody who bakes, if you don't add the baking powder and the recipe calls for it, you will not have a cake. You will have a cookie, something flat that doesn't rise, right? And sales is a lot that way, right? So I think it's a really apt analogy when you talk about baking or cooking or following recipes. Some kinds of things, like if you're making a chicken dish and you want to add a little more wine or a little less wine, or you want to add a little this or a little that, it probably won't ruin the recipe. But in others, it will matter a lot. And I think the same is true with sales. There are some sales processes that there are critical steps that if you miss them, you will have a fire. And there's others that maybe what you're telling you have a little bit more leeway. And I think it's really important. We need to have as structured of a sales process as is necessary for our team to be successful. Am I right on with that, you guys?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that.
I think the baking recipe really stands out to me too, because in some types of baking, you really need to make sure you follow the steps in order to, because like if you mix the wet ingredients in with the dry ingredients, sometimes you don't get the same consistency. For instance, you should mix dry and then wet and then combine them together in some recipes, right? Like, so it's important to follow the steps in order sometimes, to your point of needs to match what it needs to be. But the other thing that really stands out to me in the way that you said, where you can add chocolate or you could add coffee flavor, or, where you have flexibility, being very clear on what steps are important for the outcome and where there is flexibility and personalization opportunity for things. I think that adheres to the recipe metaphor very well too.
I'll jump in, and when you say my sales process doesn't work, that's a real big umbrella statement.
Wait. Why can't I move Daryl? There he is. Go ahead.
So when you say your sales process doesn't work, that's a really big statement. So my next logical question is going to be, well, what's not working and how you define it not working? So we've already talked about the recipe concept, that it's a very structured process. So the question is, you can't kind of, and I love Renee about, wet and dry. The point being, there's a flow. You do this, then you do this, then you do this. In classic case, it go from MQL to SQL, SQL to, maybe discovery to, proposal, whatever, right? And then so
I'm stop. SQL, MQL.
Sales qualified lead, marketing qualified lead.
Okay.
You have, so these aren't necessarily sales stages. What they are, it's a flow, right? The sales process goes through a flow. So when you say it doesn't work, well, based on what? Is it getting stuck? Is it not getting in? Is it not getting discovery? Or is there too much time happening? What I'm getting at is you need to audit to see where it's going. And there's a lot of common things you'll see when your sales process isn't happening. Some of the common things is you'll see it get stuck at a certain stage, or it's taking too long to progress from one stage to the next stage, right? We got that no man's land where it's the middle of the sales process and nothing's moving forward. Okay, so why is that? Is it your sales technique? Are you trying to sell a certain way, but the buyer wants to buy a different way? A good example of that is you really want a demo, and the buyer isn't ready for a demo. The buyer wants to talk about the problem, but your seller wants to talk about a demo. So is there a disconnect there? So when your CEO sales stage doesn't work, I say to you, you've got to get very particular and figure out where it's broken and what's causing it. Is it systematic? In other words, your systems don't work? Is it behavioral? It's the way your sales reps are approaching the job? Is it a combination? Is there a lack of accountability? Is there no incentive? What is it? So it's the recipe. You got to follow the recipe and make sure you don't miss any steps. And if you do, you're going to be screwed.
So then what you really need to do is make sure that you have the right recipe, because if you follow, so Brim was going to say, if you follow a recipe that doesn't have baking soda in it and it needs it, it's not going to rise. Right. So if you have a process that doesn't work and everybody follows it to the letter, it still doesn't work and you're still not going to get the result that you want.
In the same analogy, if your buyer wants chocolate chips and you're not putting chocolate chips in the recipe, you're not going to sell any cookies.
No. Go ahead, Brent.
I love this, right? And we forever we've talked about process, and I see it as a journey. And it's the journey, as Daryl said, from the moment they raise their hand and say, I have a little bit of interest, all the way through. But of course, I'm going to have that LinkedIn AI kind of perspective on this. And, when I work with a client, we create a process that's completely integrated into their existing process. So I'm going to kind of run through what that looks like. The first thing we do is we establish our goals and our KPIs. If we're going to put a process together, at where are we where is success? What are our goals of each step before we actually put the step into the process? Where do we expect step one to go? And when step one goes well, where does it go? And if it doesn't go well, where does it go? Like, we need to understand, what does each step bring to the table? The next thing we do is we do buyer mapping. Who are all the people that'll be involved in this? And, the process is not linear. It's just not. We would love it to be linear. We would love to have a marketing qualified lead turn to a sales qualified lead, turn to a discovery call, turn to a call with all the buyers. That would be ideal. But there are so many different scenarios, right? So process doesn't, as much as I love baking, I like stir fry too, right? And I have to make sure that I can go in different directions and it's going to taste good no matter which way we go. The next thing I think we need to do is align our tool stack. A lot of times we put a process together, but our CRM does not align with that process.
We'll talk about that in a second.
Okay, so I'll move on from that. And then it's, what is the strategy and who's coming into the conversation internally? If you're going to do a demo, are you the one doing a demo, or when are you bringing in that person, and who else needs to be in the room? I mean, I can go on and on. I may be going forward, but I think there's a lot of foundational work that has to go before you even have a process that works, right? And I think you got to look at it as it's not a linear journey, and you have to be okay with that, because otherwise 90%, I made that stat up, 90% of it's going to fail because it didn't go the way you thought it would. So process does not have to be linear. I'm not a baker. I'm throw it in a pot kind of person, but I know what tastes good together.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hey, Liz, do you see the question from Logan?
I just saw it. So how do you distinguish sales from marketing or sales from prospecting? Is it possible the problem is actually further upstream than sales? Yes and yes, right? So first of all, the idea that there's this super clear distinction between sales and marketing isn't true anymore, right? People are involved in the marketing process and the buying process and the selling process. It's all mixed up together. And yes, the process can be, there can be a problem with the process far upstream. You may not be interacting with the client in the way that they want to be interacted with at the point that they want to be interacted with. You may not be talking to the right people, getting the attention of the right people in the marketing process. There are a lot of things that can go wrong. And they can go wrong anywhere from way up in the marketing and prospecting all the way to the closing or the next purchase or the delivery. So when things don't work, it's really about stopping and saying what worked, where are things not working, and fixing that instead of doing, Logan, what happens most is it's marketing's fault. It's sales' fault. We got it for them. They didn't close it. They didn't get us the right thing, which is usually what happens. And we're actually going to have an entire 4-series episode series talking just about this topic, getting sales and marketing aligned around the sales process in a couple of months. Okay. Any last thoughts on sales process? Yes, Renee.
I have one. This is not going to surprise y'all that I'm going to bring it back to the experience too. I think it's really important to remember when you're building a sales process, and Bren and Daryl, you both touched on this in a different way. Daryl, when you said your customers, if they want chocolate chips and you don't put chocolate chips in, you got a broken process, right? And Bren, when you talked about, we have this internal view of the flow it should follow. And when we build this rigid thing, if it's too rigid and doesn't match the customer, then it doesn't work either, right? What is unique about a sales process compared to process building and optimization across the rest of an organization is it is a two-sided experience that you're building this process for, right? And so you have to think about both sides and optimize your process for the experience of both, because obviously the customer is very important, but if you also aren't optimizing for the salesperson, you're going to get less than optimal results because the employee experience is equal to the customer experience. You will never have a better customer experience than you do your employee experience over time, because your employees are going to give to customers what they get too. So I think it makes sense to me, because of thinking it through the lens of experience, that it is one of the most complex things to get right in a company, because it's the only time you don't have complete control over process inside your company, because it's a two-sided experience. So I'll stop and let you all comment.
Yeah, I'm going to let Mike finish up. Wait, hang on.
So-
I want to say one thing really fast, which is I've been talking a lot about sales journey, the salesperson journey. I think we need to think about it as a more aligned thing. Mike, wrap us up.
Yeah. So, I think they're just in this first part, which is about, what is sales process? We've all agreed that every sales process has components to it. Those components include a set of objectives. You can kind of tie that to something we've talked about before, a job to be done at the process. This process also has stages. People or things are in certain stages throughout the process, and there are conversions that happen when they go from one stage to another. The thing that I think we've touched on, and it's important to provide a little bit of clarity, is it's not one process. Like, there are different jobs. The customer has a job to do. They want to solve a problem that they have inside their organization. They want to implement something successful. They want to do their job. The salesperson who's selling has a job to do. The sales leadership team has a job to do. The company has a job to do. The people who hold on to things have a job to do. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that happens when it comes to sales process is too often we challenge people's process because we're thinking about it in the context of the job that we need to have done, not the job that the process is supposed to do. So whether we're talking about a customer decision-making process, we're talking about a sales process for forecasting, we're talking a sales rep process for doing their job, or we're talking about an implementation process to actually deliver a solution, it's important that we agree what the job to be done is of the specific process and be comfortable with the idea that in complex organizations, you have systems, which are the combination of both process and tools. So that's the small ad I've got.
I think that's a great place to wrap up. Any last thoughts before we? Okay. So sales process has to reflect both the buyer and the seller journey, right? And it has to incorporate the stages, the conversions, the activities, and it has to take into consideration all of the other processes and things that happen in both companies in order for them to be successful, in order for that purchase to happen and for the seller to create, develop, and put together that process, that thing that they're selling, and for the buyer to buy and use effectively. Those all have to come in to I think that was a good summation of everything said. Thanks, you guys. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. Okay, we are going to go into episode 2. And we're going to talk about aligning the CRM with the sales process, why that is such a problem. And this is just dragging the over, it's not working. Why that is such a problem, and what we can do about it to make it work better. So let's jump in. I think I just double did it, but welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. Today we're talking about making sales processes work effectively. And right now we, in this episode, are going to dive into how do you align your CRM and your sales process so that everybody understands what's going on. And we are not tying up our salespeople in such knots that they can't get anything done. So let's talk about this. What are your initial thoughts when we start talking about aligning CRM and sales process? Go ahead, Brent. Hang on. Let me see if I can get this working. It's not wanting to drag people. There we go.
Well, it's not always fun being dragged.
Right?
It's all good. Yeah. So I'm going to go through, and this changes from client to client, but we just did this for a client and we built out what does the CRM look like from the LinkedIn. And I'm just going to go quickly. We started with warm connection made. Warm connection made could be from a referral. It could be from an engagement, but it's not a cold call. So that was that. And this is what the CRM is aligning with the LinkedIn activity. The second one is connected on LinkedIn. The third one was conversation scheduled. The next one was discovery completed. Then primary influencers looped in. Then problem validated, solution aligned, decision stakeholders all confirmed, proposal, and then closed, won, or lost, and then referrals asked for. And so that was this particular, and we took that, and that was for this client. It may not be the same for everyone, but we took that, and it's a lot of stages, but those are the stages typically that they're going through. And so we put that into the CRM as the stages from a LinkedIn perspective. Now, if that is not a complex sale, by the way, that was a pretty simple sale. It was, sometimes they're a one close sale. They're an under $10,000 solution that's easy for people to pull the, if it's complex, there's going to be a lot more things that are happening. There's negotiation and lots of other things internally. But as a simple sale, what we did is we said, okay, what is every step that we can measure? And by the way, there were a lot of other things, but they weren't measurable. So we wanted to choose the things that were measurable. So what was every step that we can measure and see exactly where we are and what the defined next step is? So I just want to share that's kind of how we think about things.
Okay. And I want to back us up for just a second. So if we think about our sales process and what are we measuring, let's, even before we do that, let's distinguish between a business to business sale and a business to business complex sale, right? So if I have a complex or enterprise sale, there are a lot of people who need to do a lot of different activities. So it may be that if demo is part of my process, when and where I demo to each of the different kinds of buyers may vary. I may demo to the first person before we even qualify the lead, and I may demo to the last person just before it closes, and I might do 3 demos in between. So we want to be really thoughtful. If we have a relatively simple sales process, we can use activities like Bryn described to say, this happens, then this happens, then this happens. We have this meeting, or we send out things, we get them to say yes to accept our invitation, then we get them to a conversation, then we, right? It's very simple. Those are actions. If you have a very complex sale, within each stage, there might be 10 actions with 5 or 6 different people. So the more complex your sales process is, the more complex your entire way of measuring it needs to be. So when you're setting up the CRM, you do not create 75 stages to address every single activity that's going to happen. You then have to think about, these are the stages. This is what converts it from one to the other. These are the necessary activities that have to happen in each one of these stages in order for this sale to close successfully. And what I mean by that is, if you have to gather certain information, or you have to ask a specific question that qualifies a client in or out, like they don't use Google Docs and our tool only works with Google Docs. Like, you have to then ask that question early on before you waste time. So I think I've made that a little complicated, but we need to understand in a complex business to business sale, what the stages are, what the activities are, what must happen, what might happen. And then we can think about how we want to build that process and what tool we want to use to document the different steps. Mike, did you want to input on that?
Yeah, I think really just to hit on, reinforce that point that you highlighted, Liz, which is really important, is know whether or not you're dealing with a simple sale or a complex sale, and understand, again, reinforcing what you just said, understand why or why not activity data can be used in either one of those, because it is one of the most common mistakes I see around or within organizations that I work with that are struggling with forecasting. There are those ones where they have demo as a stage, and you ask the question, how often is there ever a scenario where they provide multiple demos? And they can answer yes, and then we start to figure out that, hey, activity can't really be or shouldn't really be a stage in the process in that specific instance. So I just wanted to reinforce your point. If you've got activity as stages and those activities happen multiple times inside your process, you probably are doing it wrong.
I just want to make one more point around that, which is when you have a process that has multiple proposal stages, like you may give a proposal before you've even qualified the client because they don't even know if they have the funding to do this project, for example. But in your sales process, you identify proposal delivered as a stage, and the next stage is close the deal. You are always going to have this big fat funnel at the bottom, this full of all this stuff floating around that isn't ready to close. And you'll be wondering, why isn't stuff closing that should close? Because it actually, that behavior, that particular action doesn't necessarily mean the decision makers are ready to make a decision. We have a question, and then I don't know. The
I can jump in on
question
that.
asked is, why not just use OpenClaw Sales Agent? And forgive my ignorance, I don't know what OpenClaw is. So
I can jump in. I can
okay,
jump in.
great.
So I'll answer the question, or at least I'll give a partial answer to the question submitted about using OpenClaw for a sales agent to help with that conversation task. And you could, by the way. I mean, the short answer is absolutely. Whether you're having a real life personal, human being, or are you using agents to do all that? But the issue is the OpenClaw agents aren't going to get you so far, right? All of that activity, whether it's from an AI-based agent or a human being, needs to be in the CRM. So you can do your own analysis. Is it working? Is it not working? And an AI agent could not work as easily as a human sales rep could not work. So the question is, how do I align my sales process with my CRM? And I sit back and I say, well, why do you want to do that? And there's kind of two sides to this coin. So you understand, right? From management's point of view, they need to be able to do a couple things. They need to have a system of record that you can fundamentally monitor the activities going on, use it to forecast for future, revenue, in projected revenue income, so they can budget accordingly, hire accordingly, ramp up infrastructure, support organizations, whatever, to respond to anticipated demand and tension because sales is closing deals. But they also needed to coach. They also need to know, people are getting stuck. Why are they getting stuck? Are they getting stuck at a certain step, at a certain stage? Why is that? What support do they need to make them more successful? That's the management side. Hence, a CRM does that. From the sales rep point of view, what they need is a tool that's going to help them maximize their activity, because a lot of sales reps aren't great at that, as we both know. But we want to make sure that the reps don't resent the CRM. So if that's the case, then we need to use the CRM. We need to, again, AI is a good example, but we need to automate as much as possible so that the reps are not doing admin tasks, but are actually actively selling. So long story short, how do we align it? Well, if it isn't in the CRM, it didn't happen. Golden rule, right? But we also need to be understanding. The sales rep needs to understand what management's trying to do, and management needs to understand what the sales reps need and why they'll resent the system. If everybody kind of works and supports each other and puts systems in place to facilitate each side, then your sales system will be aligned with your CRM, and it will be an enabling tool, an enabling process, as opposed to a resented process. Okay, that's me and my soapbox. I'm off.
Any last thoughts on Renee?
Yeah, I think I'll just share where I think you've all touched on it in some way, but I think this is where the confusion often starts for people, where I see CRMs get all wonky and chaotic, is at the core of a CRM is a database, right? Like, this is your data that's going to help you with everything in the kind of the heart of your business, right? But you also have to build and reflect your process and in your sales process to understand what's happening with your pipeline, to understand where things are in the funnel, what's going to close, to be able to do some forecasting, all of those things, right? Those two things are separate, but they're interdependent. And where I see a lot of this, like you talking about activity being recorded versus stages, right? Like, that's where I see all this get mixed in, because people are trying to get the data in and substituting that for the process, right? And that's not the experience that the salesperson or the customer are having with it. That's getting data in. So remembering that it's doing dual, and then it's giving you reporting, and a lot of people have their service side of the business hooked into it and everything else. But remember, there's process and database, and they're interdependent, but it's not the exact same thing. So like just getting the data in is not your sales process. And that's where sometimes that's where activity gets conflated into sales process. So I would just say taking a step back and documenting what data you really need, to Daryl's point, if it's not in there, you don't have it to make decisions. You can't decide if you need new products. You can't decide if you need new staff. You can't decide if you need to do other things, right? Unless you have data. You can't find lookalikes for your current customers if you don't have the right data on who your current customers are, all those reasons. But you also have to separate what the data is that you need from what you need to do to sell, right? And build those out separately and make sure they work together. That's where I see a lot of confusion come in, when those two things kind of get conflated rather than interdependent.
Okay. Any last thoughts on
Just
sales
yeah,
process and CRM?
Liz, just super quick, just because there's some questions here about like whether or not you use agents to go pull information and all that stuff. Absolutely, you can do any of this stuff. That doesn't mean that you should do that stuff. If we think there's a lot of bad data in systems today, that amount of bad data is going to multiply significantly over the course or over as we go forward, considering the number of different inputs that we're able to get information from. So what I do with clients is go through an exercise that's tied directly to the role reflective model. And we've talked about this on previous discussions. It's what's the definition of the data point? So what? Why does it matter? Now what? What are we actually going to do with it? And if you can't answer those three questions, from my perspective, it doesn't earn the right to be in the CRM. Now, given the amount of data that you're able to capture in the CRM and put it in different places that's hidden from folks, that doesn't, you've got a little bit more flexibility about what you add. But if you're going to focus on sustainability and not creating a bunch of waste, and you want to make it really simple you want to reduce complexity and make it simple for your team, minimize the amount of information that you're capturing and that you're requiring that they put in there, and make sure that it has a specific job, a specific purpose as it goes through. But yes, to Ab's point, you can use all of these tools and it's just going to get even crazier. And a lot of times the people who are asking these kind of questions usually are selling that kind of a platform, and this isn't the place for that. I mean, most of the people who are trying to implement those agents right now have never managed a sales process, but they've used ChatGPT to figure it out. And I'm happy to have a conversation directly with anybody who, especially Ab, if that's what you're getting at.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah. How do we align the CRM with the sales process? One is we start with the sales process, then think about the CRM. How are we going to use it to help us achieve what we want to? I think there's an elephant in the room that we absolutely need to discuss. How does AI fit into that? And the answer is different for every company, how you're going to implement AI into your CRM and sales process. But I think that the critical piece that has to come out of this, there are two things. One is, we've already said it. It needs to be simple. It needs to work. It needs to not tie down everybody. But the second is, it needs to measure and motivate momentum. If all we're doing is using the CRM for past tense, it is not helping us move the sale forward. It's not helping us prioritize our work. It's not helping everybody see what forward actions are working and what aren't, what conversations or whatever are working that aren't. So when you're thinking about this alignment, remember, the CRM begins and ends as a tool to help your salespeople be more effective. And then it can do a whole bunch of other really cool things.
I want to give a shout out to Ab. He's added a few of my messages here where he's smiling at us and says he's not selling anything. He's just kind of curious, and I love it, Ab. That's the whole purpose of the podcast. Ask away. Those are great questions you're asking.
And it's okay to sell. Like, it's okay to sell.
Yeah, it's okay to sell.
It's not okay to sell without,
yeah.
it's not okay to sell without context. So
want to add to it too that everything that we've just said about the process and what you do with a CRM, like, that applies no matter whether it's actually going to be a CRM or an AI replacement, right, of a CRM,
Agreed.
or if you're going to use humans or agents. The figuring it out, documenting it, making sure that we all know the lanes that we need to hit and stay in, and in order to see success in the outcome, that ensures success no matter what the platform is or if it's an agent or a person. So, like, I think the answer to it is yes, you can do most of these things either way, but you got to do these steps first.
All right. Hey, everybody, thanks for joining us for this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. All right. As we jump into the next one, we're going to be talking about predictability. So, welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. I'm Liz Hyman, your host, and we are here. Move me over. I'm Liz Hyman, your host, and we are here talking about sales process and making it work. And in this episode, we're talking about predictability. Right? Part of the reason we have a sales process and the reason we use tools like CRM is so we can begin to predict outcomes. And why do we need to predict outcomes? We need to predict outcomes as company owners or as company leaders, because I need to know how to spend resources in order to make this company run. And if I can never predict revenue, I can't do that. So the question then becomes, how do we use sales process to help us do that more effectively? And I am going to throw that out to the team and see who wants to answer. I'm going to change our view here if you're watching us, so we're all on, because the system doesn't seem to be working today. So how do we use sales process to help us have a more predictable company, more predictable revenue, more predictable outcomes, better forecasting, better planning? How does the sales process impact that?
So I'm just going to talk for a moment on this, because this is really, when it comes to, I mean, we put in process in place, but it's for like this little sliver of the sales, which is the LinkedIn area. But I do believe that we have to, once a month or once a quarter, do a stop, start, and continue, right? What's working, what's not working, what should we continue, what should we start doing that we're not doing? So the challenge with predictable is nothing is really predictable. Like, past performance does not predict future outcome. That's in sales too, even though we can say that it does. Things change, right? The environment changes, needs change, the economy changes, all these things, right? So predictable is dynamic. But as sales leaders, it is critical that we are looking at what is working right now and let's do more of that. And then when that stops working, let's stop doing that and do more of what, whatever it is that's working. So I will leave it at, I believe predictable sales comes from really, really strong start, stop, and continue conversations.
So it's a great place to start, right? So the very first thing is, by having a sales process that we track and measure, we have some data, some ability to have a conversation around what's working, what's not working, that everybody understands. Well, I'm doing a demo and it's not working. Okay, who are you doing the demo with? At what point in the sales process are you doing the demo, right? It gives us a framework for a conversation and assessment. What else does it do to help us to have more predictable revenue?
Well, I will say I often work with people who either have a mess of a CRM and starting over, or kind of starting with a new version of a CRM. And one of the things that the first 6 months or so on a CRM is going to really help us do in those situations is create a better customer journey. So more than just optimizing what the process is or whatever, like, we can really start to see what the real journey actually looks like if we have thought through what they're going through, have some sort of data points. If we're collecting data, some of it is passive, right? Like how they're interacting with things that we send them, things like that. Then we can really start seeing what that journey looks like and figure out where there are gaps and improve. And that gets us to more predictability because it's more complete, right? I would say that's one area that is very helpful, at least that I find.
Mike, Daryl, any thoughts?
Well, I always, I struggle with this myself, right? Because it's a question of how do I make sales more predictable? Well, how do you make sales reps more predictable? I mean, it's kind of like, good luck with that. You can coach them, you can train them, but everybody learns differently. Everybody applies what you learn differently. Everybody has different work ethics. So how do you make it more predictable? At the end of the day, I think you have to work backwards. You have to say, what is it I need to have, you think of it as a math formula. What are the inputs I need to the math formula to do the calculation to say, this is my forecast, or this is the certainty I have that this deal will close with this, with 80+%, whatever it is, right? Is it you've talked to so many people? Is it you've identified all of the inputs? I've met with everybody in the buying committee. I've demoed everybody. I've sent personalized stuff. I've did an ROI calculator, whatever it might be. You need to understand the inputs you need, and then to do that math. And then you need to make sure that the sales process intentionally seeks to gather that information, or to achieve those goals, such as talking to everybody in the buying committee and getting different inputs. Without that, it's a guessing game, and you're at the mercy of the sales reps, and some are better than others, and some are more relational, and some are just, whatever. So that's my lame kind of answer, because predictability is the thing that we continually chase forever and ever in this profession of ours, and I don't think anybody ever achieves it.
No, but I think that the critical piece here is more like,
Yeah.
I don't care how genius you are not going to have exactly perfect forecast 10 years in a row.
Nope.
There are too many outside influences that can impact that. But what can we do to get better, to get closer, to guess better, to support better, to get to that endpoint that we need to? I think that's important.
Liz,
Yeah.
you're saying that one other thing that I probably should have included, that you just totally helped me remember it. I think that having a good process in the CRM and good data in the CRM helps with predictability by also being able to forecast the unpredictability. If you can forecast the unpredictability, then you know where you are predictable. So simple things like, I work with mostly B2B customers. I can tell you, because I deal with, I've dealt with hundreds or thousands of B2B companies over time. I can look and tell you automatically where there are cyclical changes. Like, everybody's like, oh, business, I can't tell you how many CEOs I've had. It's like, business is evergreen. There's no cycle. And I'm like, yes, there is. If you're B2B and your customers are all on vacation, you got a cycle, right? Like, it doesn't mean you can't still be closing, but I can look at the analytics for most companies and tell you that the 2 weeks of Christmas to New Year's, like that period, is like dead. That doesn't mean that things aren't closing, because that can be, but it does mean that a lot of your activity is going to take a big dip, which is going to affect your pipeline at some point, right? Wherever that dip comes. I had another client where their customers were all at their big biennial conference, crickets in sales for the week that all the people were at the conference, right? So now we have an annotation that's like, on that week, we should be forecasting for a lower week, and then putting the forecast higher for the weeks following, because we're going to have a lot of activity and sales conversations at that conference. So it gives you a chance to put the unpredictability into the system so that you have more predictability simply by eliminating some of those anomalies. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. All right. Because you're basing, historical patterns, Christmas, user conferences, whatever it might be, with cause and effect. And then therefore I can do a decent amount of forecasting. I can't tell you how many times I've been in the last week of a month or the last week of a quarter, and I've got the CEO and the CFO staring at me saying, are we going to hit our numbers? And all you can do sometimes, you can say, listen, we have the opportunities, the deals are there. We don't know if they're all going to close, but looking at past performances, we should make it, because I expect at least 1 in 3 of these deals will close, blah, 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 blah. And that what I'm sharing with you is all based on data in the system, based on that's been captured in your sales process. And then just a sample size large enough that you can start to see patterns. And that's what it comes down to. But if you don't capture the data, that's where it starts. You're screwed. The problem is sales reps never want to give you the data because CRM becomes an admin drag. So whatever you can do, going back to our previous conversation, to actually make the CRM automated to make their life easier is going to help you both collectively achieve your shared goals.
Yeah, if I could have AI do anything, take my words and put it in the right place in the CRM so I don't have to do it. Like, wouldn't that be magical?
Yep.
I've been saying that for how many years now?
It exists though now. Like there's some pretty cool companies that are doing just that kind of stuff, and they'll tag the content properly, and they do a really good job with it. The thing I'd add to all of this when it comes to having predictability in your forecast, and if you want to get into forecasting, take a listen to, I think it was last month, we got into this in some pretty good detail. Every stage in your sales process that where the specific job to be done is forecasting the amount of money that you're planning on bringing in, your closed won sales in a given month, quarter, year, whatever. Have a stage name. That stage should be defined. Make that definition as simple as possible. I recommend using past tense in your stage names.
I don't, but that's okay.
That's fine.
We disagree on that.
We can agree to disagree on that, but and there's different perspectives for everybody. But stage name, stage definition, the criteria that is used to demonstrate that you've achieved that stage, you've exited that stage, and that's why I like to use past tense and make that criteria very simple. A single binary statement, 1s and 0, or yes, no question, however you want to look at it. And then over time, update your probability of sale associated with that stage, the percentage that it gets applied based on your data. And use that same set of stages across all of your different pipelines inside your business, and you'll improve your communication. And I see it happen over and over again. You can simplify this stuff. You don't need to make it as complicated as many of you do, but sometimes you get credit for how complicated and cute and all of it looks. Yeah, sometimes. And then you lose your job. Excuse me. So,
and you lose your job based on historical patterns and sample size. Oh, look, it's 18 months. You're fired.
Yeah, and then
every 14 to 15 months, right?
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. We're so glad you were here with us. Okay, before we jump in the next one, I want to throw you guys a curveball, or whatever one actually says in baseball. Let's talk about whether sales process is going away, because AI process is going to make CRMs and sales process and all of this non-existent.
But the process is in place. It's just who's creating it.
Let's have this conversation, because I've heard people say sales process will not matter because of AI. So let's talk about that. Let's do it.
I don't get it.
It's a huge right now. Before we start the episode, I will say it's really big. That's one of the reasons HubSpot and Salesforce took such huge hits in the stock market 7 to 10 days ago.
So let's talk about it. Let's have this together, because I think all of these things matter. Okay. Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. I'm Liz Hyman, your host, and I am here with your Sales SOS podcast crew, Bryn Tillman, Renee Bigelow, Daryl Prell, and Mike Simmons. And I just changed the topics on the team for today. So we are talking about sales process, right? And we're talking about how do you know if your sales process is broken? How do you make it work better? So if you want to listen to the last few episodes, we've talked about some of those things. But here's the thing that I heard recently. 2 things. One is CRMs are going to go away. AI is going to replace them. And we don't need to worry about sales process anymore, because AI is going to take care of all of this for us. So, and what you didn't hear behind the scenes was Bryn just said, I don't understand that. And I've been sort of thinking in similar lines, like, how does that work? So what do you guys think? Is AI going to make the need for a sales process completely go away?
Well, can I answer the question on the CRM side?
Yes. Okay. So is it going to make our CRMs go away?
So I'm on the CRM side, I'd like to say we work too hard for the software as it is, even the best CRM software out there. 100%. I don't know anyone, even at a CRM company, that wouldn't agree with this. There are entire cottage industries that have built up for people to learn the system, to be able to run the system. It's the biggest sticking point for sales teams, right? How much they have to work on a piece of software versus selling things, right? So let's just admit that part is all broken, can be better. It's way better than it was. We have more data, we have all whatever. It's in this stage that's clunky and not as good as it needs to be. AI will disrupt the working in it. 100%. It will change the working in it. 100% believe that. However, a CRM at its core is still a database. And an AI model is not a database. It has a memory, but it's not the same as a database. So we're still going to need a database. And there are some more AI-friendly versions of databases than what our CRM companies are right now. Supabase is one I'm seeing tossed around a good bit, and I've looked into to understand. But you're still going to need a database because AI needs something more than, as much as it needs energy for compute, it needs data, right? It thrives on data. So our need for a database is actually higher than what it was with humans, who we relied on a lot of institutional knowledge in their machines inside their heads, right? So until we have an AI replacement for a database, I still think we need our CRMs, meaning I don't think anybody can be thinking they're going to walk away from their CRM right now because it's at its core your database. Do I think you can put AI to work on those CRMs? 100%. And do I think that something could come along that could disrupt it? Sure, everything's getting disrupted, right? I just don't think we're completely there. I have had people, your point about the sales process, now I'll switch this back over for you all to pick back up, but I have had people send me examples of sales processes that they're doing that are very AI driven. It's a lot of agent, still some human in the loop. Here's the key. The places where I'm seeing it work are very personalized and often still founder-led sales.
Founder-led, exactly.
Yeah. So if you have one or two people and you have like one or two email accounts and you have, like a few sources where you're piecing all this together, I think you can make this work, right? If you can make your sales process work with a spreadsheet right now, then you can probably use AI to do a lot. You'll still need your human in the loop. But when you get more complex than the founder-led or those one or two people, there's a lot out there. So that's where I'll leave it and let y'all take over about the question about process.
Go ahead, Rob.
I can't go too deep into this, but my brain is now reeling, and this process will never go away. It's who's performing the process. So the idea of does AI eliminate the sales process? It eliminates some of the human process. It will accelerate research and messaging and follow-up and proposals and RFPs. It will accelerate all of that, but that's still part of the sales process. The buyer still has a journey that they're going on. And maybe it's AI talking to AI through the whole journey, but it's still a process. So the idea of does sales process get eliminated? No, never. How much the human is involved is what will be.
So what if instead of a sales process, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, you guys. So what if instead of a sales process, I just have an AI agent sitting with my salesperson in our meeting, telling them what to say next after the
Coaching.
Yeah,
an AI coach, basically. Yeah. Yeah, that works.
So I don't need a sales process then. I don't need to understand the process.
Let me jump in on that. I don't mean to distract. Here's my take on that. It's a great question. It genuinely is. And I love that Renee brought up the point about a lot of, founder-led startup. And if you look at the research will back up exactly what Renee just said, is that it's great at startup. It's mostly good at data entry and doing the basic functions. That's where we're at today. That may change tomorrow. Models are evolving rapidly. We all know that. But here's the thing. As long as humans are making the purchase decision, you're always going to need a human element to the sales process because humans are emotional. That's the first part. And AI hasn't quite mastered yet how to handle certain objections. Others are all over the place, often rooted in emotion, personal baggage. You've been scorned. You've been abused as a child, whatever. You've not been daddy's favorite, whatever it might be. AI is not going to figure that out. The second thing is, if your company has got tens or hundreds of customers, the sample size isn't big enough yet for AI to fundamentally figure out the sales process. So AI will be great at coaching you, working with you to work through the sales process, to refine the sales process, to implement gates and whatnot in the sales process, to work with you to refine the CRM. But AI at this point in time today, as long as humans are buying, is not going to be the one to tell you the sales process you need to effectively sell to human buyers.
Mike, what you got for us?
He's smiling. I want to hear what he has to say.
I just have to say, for our people who are listening, not watching, if you hear us chuckling in the background, it's because Mike changed his description
And
title.
changed his position. He got engaged all of a sudden.
First it was old guy, and then
Yeah.
it was old guy who shots at Claude. So I just need that to be noted in audio for our podcast listeners.
This is absolutely going to change everything.
Okay.
And it's fun. Like, we are very, very fortunate to be alive and around here when all of this is going on, because most of the people that are on here went through the evolution of maybe playing with like an Atari 2600 back in the day, to then moving into like Super Nintendo or Nintendo and then Super Nintendo, and Daryl's going and grabbing his stuff. Yeah, like this. So we've got like a front row seat for some amazing evolution. At the same time, there's going to be a lot of opinion about what is or what is or is not going to be needed, or is not going to be real, or whatever. Here's the beauty of it. I think this is going to force our teams and our people to really engage directly with our customers. And it's going to reinforce the importance of customers really engaging with us, while a lot of really good stuff happens in the background so that people don't waste a lot of time. So to answer your question, Liz, I am extremely hopeful that this will completely remove the sales process from a stage component that is being inputted by a human inside the CRM at some point in time, because CRMs exist now because they can exist, and makes it easier for managers to manage larger groups of people. But to Daryl's point that he joked about, and I joked about too as we were going through it, a lot of those managers and leaders are getting fired. Their shelf life is much shorter because the expectations are that they should be able to move through things a lot faster. And so my rambling old guy shouting at clouds right now rant is that I am super stoked about it. I think it's going to completely evolve. And I think it's good. I'm excited to be a part of how we solve for it as we go through. If you're not out there using these tools to figure out how to make your workflow better at an individual rep level, you're missing out. And if you're not doing it at a manager level, you're missing out. And I think we're going to be able to do more with the data now that is so unstructured. I mean, like, think about when you first started using Access. Like, how many people saw an implementation of a CRM using an Access database?
Yep.
That was it. Like, one of our first clients, the name of their CRM was Mom. Like, that was what they called it, and it was mail order management system. They literally were sending VHS of anti-harassment videos out to people, and then CD-ROMs, and then that kind of stuff. But so yeah, I think it's going to completely change, and I can't wait. But I think we've also got a long way to go before we get there.
I think there's a misalignment between expectations and reality. I think a lot of the tech bros and a lot of the founder-led companies are in a bubble where they believe AI can solve everything. And they'll see the handful of companies that are like, they got to $100 million in revenue in the first year, next AI superstar. Those are the exceptions, guys. Those are massively exceptions. So
they also have a team of people that have the skill set to be on the frontier and, more importantly, have a risk profile to live on the frontier.
Yes.
And
That's
I
a
think
good
it's
one.
really important. Like some of my clients don't have a spreadsheet. Right?
Yeah.
They're still using Post-it notes.
You're using the
Some of my
machine on
clients have
person's head. Yeah.
spreadsheets. So now all of a sudden we're talking about like AI is the answer to everything. And they're like we're not low tech, we're no tech.
Yeah.
Or we're low tech.
Yeah, Liz, I do think some of those people will bypass a traditional CRM right now, right?
And it's possible. But
Yeah.
I think, and why I'm saying this is if you're listening to us and you're going, AI, I had a conversation with somebody yesterday about this. They're like, maybe AI can replace our agents. And I'm like, back up. Like, what do you, their agents are people who answer the phone.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like human beings who answer the phone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hang on a second.
Right. Yeah.
As we look at AI, let's start by looking at what do we do every day that AI can easily do to make our lives easier.
Yeah.
That doesn't have to be creative and doesn't have to be kind. It doesn't have to be caring or empathetic or smart or creative, right? Look, let's leave that stuff that humans are usually really good at for humans. And let's figure out all this stuff that weighs us down. Let's look into our organizations and figure out how AI takes the burden of the CRM away, the burden of guessing which stage it's in. Let AI listen to the transcript and figure out what needs to happen next with you and what stage it's in with you, instead of thinking we're just going to let AI do everything.
Liz, I have two things that I'll share that I think are very helpful. One, I happen to have a professional acquaintance that was the chief AI officer at a Fortune 500 company. And he recently left and is kind of going out to do his own thing. I would too, if I had a skill set, right? Like very highly, highly desirable. But in talking with him, he confirmed for me, even at the enterprise level, that this is the right step that I've been telling my clients. If you think you want to take advantage of this new disruption, if you think you are wanting to move into AI, if you feel like it's an inevitability, and I feel like it is for everyone, right? So this is why I encourage my clients. The number one thing you need to be doing right now is documenting and understanding, because you can't implement AI without instruction, right?
Documenting, what she's saying is documenting your processes.
Your processes, your data, like getting as much data as you can give to that AI to do a better job for you. You are onboarding a system, right? You're onboarding in the instance of agents, you could be onboarding an entire team to be doing things, and they have to have lanes. They need to know how they should be interacting with each other, where they should start, where they should stop. You can't do all that if you haven't first defined what you're doing now, right? You can define a better state too before you implement it, like all of those things. The second point that I will make relative to this, and why I think it is why I'm so comfortable saying this is an inevitability for all of us, even to my clients who would rather sit on the fence in the first waves of things. They are not the early adopters. They aren't the laggards, but they aren't the early adopters. Consumers are moving faster than businesses in this instance. And AI is in your sales process more than most people realize right now. So whatever we are not doing, your customer is probably already doing. They're already taking your proposal and asking AI questions about it. They're already giving multiple proposals to AI and having AI help them. They are already doing lots of things. And I think we have to prepare our teams for that and be thinking about how they're implementing it as we're thinking about how we want to implement it. I'll give you just a little anecdote to step away and let you all jump in. But I was in a sales team meeting this week, and as the sales team was going around the room and sharing things, one of the sales reps said that he had a customer come in that was just came in and started doing his own thing without onboarding, without wanting to be handheld. Like he got in, he knew what he wanted. He was going to town doing his own thing. And the client has improved their technology over time so that clients really could onboard themselves and do things, right? And it was throwing him for a loop that this client didn't need anything. And he needed confirmation from some of the more veteran sales team that that's okay. Right. And I think as AI helps our customers, we may see more of that. That doesn't mean we don't need people, because it just means the people need to be deployed in other places. They still needed him, right? And some customers are going to need people in some ways and not in the other. The experience being improved doesn't always mean a human, but it also doesn't always mean AI, right? So really understanding where to match those two things on both sides of the equation. Like the sales team needs to be prepared for this changing on the customer side too. So
Yes.
I'll sit back and let you.
Daryl, Mike, any last thoughts?
What I would add is it's a tool, right? Like the technology is a tool. And I mean, I can do some good things with different golf clubs in my bag, and I can do some horrible things with different golf clubs in my bag. Me with wedges around the green is not good. Me with an iron in my hand is much better. If you don't have the skill, the tool is worthless in a lot of cases and dangerous in many other cases. So let's understand, hey, we have a tool, and in order to be able to use these tools, which are continuing to evolve, like right now, I'm actively using ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and Grok. And I'm using them in different ways, and I'm taking what they do and put them back into each other. And I'm just trying to figure out, why do I want to use which of these tools? Now I'm using paid versions of each of these tools to help kind of keep things going. But I at least know based on my experience, not know what somebody else told me my experience should be or what is going to happen. So you do things, you reflect on those things, and then you iterate. And that is a human skill that we all have, from both a pattern matching, a learning perspective, getting creative. So it's a tool. Don't make it anything more than a tool. Build the skills to help you leverage the tool, and you'll be in a better position to help those who've not yet either built those skills or use those tools.
Daryl?
So I'm going to build on what Mike just said. I'll share a quick story because I know we're tight in time. So I started a new gig back in December, and so I had to come in late into the year to make a plan for 2026, which I did. I released it in mid January because I needed a little bit of time to figure out what the hell was going on. We had a Christmas break, and here was the plan in a nutshell that I put forward. So my role is Chief Growth Officer, so I own all of sales, marketing, and RevOps. And what I fundamentally said was, the plan is this: it's crawl, walk, run. And crawl was basically, we're going to put in some basic sales and marketing skills, a regular monthly cadence of campaigns, regular outbound prospecting, everything you would expect. And once that was going and the team was doing best practices and the CRM was capturing the information it needed, then in a quarter or two, we're going to add the walk stage, which is, let's start getting agents involved, looking for opportunities that we can't find on our own. We can deploy a whole bunch of agents. And then the run is, then those agents will start qualifying it and feeding it right through the funnel as much as possible. And the idea is, it would work as a symphony. We have the traditional, we have the next kind of the phase 2 and a phase 3 all working together that collectively will deliver maximum revenue to us. And I will tell you this: there was nothing but smiles on everybody's faces. And the reason there were smiles because they recognized, their own people internally needed to have core base skills to do their jobs first and foremost. And then we weren't ready to go crazy. We weren't betting the farm on going right to agents. It was a combination. And that's what I think you should do. You need a little bit of both. Embrace it, but don't think it's the savior, I guess is my answer.
Liz, I also just will add, and I think this goes with your crawl, walk, run, Daryl. I mentioned risk profile when I talked about founder-led companies and people starting to use a lot of AI. Risk profile is important for many reasons. If you have compliance, if you have regulatory issues,
yep.
If whatever the different pieces of your business, you really need to match your risk profile to the risks in AI, meaning like, is this a low risk AI use, even though we're in a high risk profile place, right? Like that is, I think that is really important. And if you have, one of you mentioned earlier, if you have a smaller sample size, if you have small client base, right? Like your risk profile of mucking things up with a small client base is much higher, right? So like really kind of understanding your risk profile in addition to all that documentation to get ready for that crawl, walk, run. It helps you set those stages, I think, for crawl, walk, run.
I also think it's really important as we're implementing AI to go back to what Mike said. One is a tool. To go back to what Renee always says is there is a buyer journey. And however we use this tool, if it does not enhance the buyer journey, if it does not match and help them make a decision, then it is not going to be effective. And third, I don't care how good the tool is. If you don't implement it well, you have a problem. You know, I'm going to go back to Mike's golf analogy. I had a brand new driver, and I'm not kidding you. I hit it I hit it further than I'd ever hit it before. You won't believe me anyway. So I hit it really well. And I got up to the green on the first hole. I got up to drive and I hit it and it went 3 feet because it just bounced right off the tip and did nothing because I wasn't standing properly. I picked my head up. I was so excited. I wasn't focused, right? So it didn't matter. It was this great new tool. I could do amazing things with it and I didn't.
Yep.
So let's not get too caught up in all of the things that could possibly happen. What can we do right now? This is what Daryl's saying, crawl, walk, run. What can we do now? Will AI replace sales process? Maybe, but it isn't today. So what can we do today in our company with the resources and the skill sets and the willingness and ability? What can we do that has the most impact without trying to, throw away the baby with the bathwater? Let's use what we have, what we can. That's mine. Daryl?
I'm done. I think we nailed it.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. We will see you soon.